Good evening, everyone. I'm Bailey Howard Leonard. I'm a board member with the Permian Basin Adult Literacy Center. And I want to thank you for joining our live author stream with Thanhhà Lai. And a big thank you to Southwest 66 Credit Union for sponsoring all of our 2021 live streams. Thanks for joining us at a special time for our Literacy Month fundraiser. Stay tuned after the interview, and we're going to give you a little sneak peek of the amazing baskets that our board members made for a silent auction. Hi, Thanhhà. How are you?
I'm great. Thank you for having me.
So you're interviewing with us from New York, right?
Yes, just north of New York City.
Well, we were talking earlier about how the weather's a little bit nicer there, so I'm glad that you have some nice weather.
Yeah, we're starting to see our leaves turn. So.
Oh, that's pumpkin spice weather. Can you tell our viewers a little bit about yourself and a little bit of your history?
Well, I think what most people know about me is that I indeed did come here as a child refugee right after the war in 1975. So my first novel, Inside Out and Back Again, talked about that. So I think that's the knowledge that people usually come in with. So I came here without speaking English, and it was just. It just speaks to all the all the shocking events that a human being can go through, and yet you come out of it. And so I thought that the whole refugee crisis was over, and then only to learn within the last 5 years that it keeps going. And now the latest one is from Afghanistan. So I am very much a writer who has written about refugees, and I imagine I will always write about refugees because that's just my background. They interest me. It fascinates me how you can take one human being from this soil, replant them in this soil, and then just watch and see what happens. And it's not just during the first year. You really have to watch them over like 3 decades to see exactly what will happen to this child or this adult, and they will have vastly different experiences.
I love that metaphor about planting seeds. I think that's a beautiful way to look at it. So, adult literacy is our primary focus. Why is adult literacy important to you? And obviously, you know multiple languages, so you understand that it's hard. It's hard without the literacy.
Well, I remember standing in front of 4th graders in Alabama. And I didn't know what they were saying, and they didn't know what I was about. And when you land in a new place as a refugee, or just as anyone who is not speaking the language of that new place, it's just not your identity that's taken away. It's your whole sense of self. So adult literacy to me is just a way to reclaim yourself. You must have literacy in order to express yourself, in order to become a whole human being. And I think of my mother when I talk about adult literacy, because, she doesn't speak English. She never picked it up. She knows just the rudimentary English, just enough to get through a grocery store, let's say. And so she's not going to want to speak it, because when she speaks Vietnamese, she's a poet. So she sounds beautiful. And so, when I think about what you lose and what you gain in this process of resettlement and immigration and refugeedom, for me, I lost Vietnamese and I gained English. My Vietnamese is much weaker than my English. I can function in it. But my mother is fully functioning in Vietnamese. So she just basically lost just like a key into the new society. She never learned how to drive. She will never be a part of that whole world that we call daily life here. And I think it's huge. I mean, especially when her Vietnamese is so gorgeous. And only her children really know it, because that's who she speaks to. She's not really active in the Vietnamese community. So I think about that a lot, the sense of what you lose when you change cultures.
When did you start writing?
I've always dreamed of being a writer, but when you come here as a refugee, it's not the first thing you think about. I know I will start writing. It took me about 20 years to really learn English. I mean, learn it so that you understand the nuances behind everything. I still get my verb tenses mixed up. I think that's just part of it. I'm never going to get it 100% correct, but it's good enough for now. I think I majored in journalism at UT Austin. So I'm a Texan. I went over there. And the whole time I was in journalism school. I was dreaming about writing a novel, but I didn't dare say it because it just sounds so scary, right? I mean, who's going to pay you to write a novel? At least there will be a newspaper, at least back in the mid 80s, they would hire you and you would have a position as a reporter. So I went the journalism route just to get acclimated with the act of writing daily. But I didn't grow up writing. Again, I grew up basically running around the sun and just, just playing. So I would say that I'm not a natural writer in the sense that, you hear about these authors who read every single book when they were from age 8, age 4 to 14, the Nancy Drew, all of that. I never did that. I was outside playing. What I did do was had to learn English. And the process of learning English made me a writer because I was so obsessed with really getting it right. Like I wanted to learn English the way I had learned algebra, all the equations, all of it fitting together. And so 20 years later, I had worked so hard to learn English that I thought, well, what am I going to be? Right. Well, and then I thought, who uses language the most? A writer. So it's by default that I'm a writer. If there had not been a war and I did not have to learn English, I really think I'd be a naturalist. I'd still be running around in the wild trying to catch a lizard or something.
getting that vitamin D. So I love the way that you frame that. By the way, I am a native English speaker. I still don't get my verb tenses right all the time. English is a very complicated, unnecessarily complicated, difficult language.
It is and it isn't. It's a very practical language, right? To me, it's a business language. Like that, I imagine that's why all the businesses in the world use languages, their mutual language. You don't have to figure out when you address someone which pronoun to use, which is 99% of the work in Vietnamese. And if you get it wrong, you have insulted all kinds of people. Here it's just I, you, he. It's just right now the pronouns are a little bit
complicated.
But back then, you just picked a pronoun and you went with it. And I could say I to every single person I speak to, not in Vietnamese. Not if they're older than my mom or it's complicated. So to me, English is so easy in that sense. But these verb tenses, they get you. But then I started learning French. And then I realized the English has nothing on the French. Forget it. So I'm very glad my mother did not drag us to France. I'd still probably be learning the language there. So.
I also am still learning French, and I started when I was little. So can you tell me a little bit about what inspired specifically Butterfly Yellow? What inspired you to tell this story?
You know what? When I was a journalist, I was a reporter on Orange County Register, which is where more overseas Vietnamese live than anywhere else. And so that's south of LA. And my beat was the police beat, the night police beat. But because I was the only Vietnamese speaking reporter at the newspaper at that time, all the Vietnamese stories that came up would be mine. So I would go out there and back then my Vietnamese was even worse than it is now. So, I would babble in my sad little Vietnamese and I would get the story. And what I realized was that every single refugee family that I interviewed had glorious, beautiful stories for me. Everybody was happy. Children were going to Berkeley and UCLA and becoming doctors and lawyers. And then I thought, well, there are no sad stories, but we know there's a whole legacy of sadness that comes with the war and the post-war. Nobody wanted to talk about it. If something did happen to them on the way over, certainly they weren't going to discuss it with me, a reporter. So I thought, how do I tell this story without being invasive, without splashing someone's face on the front page and putting their real name to a story? It took me, I'm such a slow thing. It took me forever. I was like, journalism is not the way to do it. I'd have to go fiction. And then I come up with the Hung story because at 18, it's really, at the crust, you can become an adult at 18. Like her uncle can't chase her. She has the right to go off on her own. Because if I made her any younger, it would be a different story. So I needed her to be just old enough to be going across Texas by herself and having this kind of like awkward adventure and be having just this very brief introduction to romantic love, if it is that, but at least a very unlikely friendship is what she's going to find. So I needed all that, and I've always wanted to tell a story of someone who came over here by boat, who had to, who encountered the pirates. They were real. Most people think I made it up when I talk about the Thai pirates. Unfortunately, they were real. And about the refugee camps and about all the resettlement procedures that you had to go through in order to get here. It is an ordeal to just land in Dallas. By the time she did, 2 months had gone by, but she's like she lived 20 years. She was exhausted. And
Right.
so, to get on a bus by herself without really speaking English and finding her brother, it just seemed like that would be easy.
It's a lot of growing up to do.
Yes.
So you touched on bits and pieces of the story, but you also touched on your real life. Can you tell us a little bit about what is the core story of the book before we get into a reading?
The core story is I have an 18-year-old girl named Hang, and her name means moon. She spent 3 years living with the communists after the war, and she is on a mission to find her brother who accidentally got taken to the United States as an orphan at the end of the war. So I kind of based it on Operation Baby Lift, which was real. But they were taking babies. So I had him as a 5-year-old or 4-year-old, I believe, and she was 15 at the time, so that later she's 18 and he's 11, and then they're going to reunite. And it's really a story about what happens when you get separated from your family at that crucial age. 4, you're going to lose your language. That's the first thing. All right. If no one else around you is speaking this language you grew up with, you will lose it. And that's what happened to her brother. But then she's going to think about, how do I reclaim him? And then she's going to, it's this idea that whatever is in her head, whatever she's been making up stories about him, like he needs her to rescue him, and all those stories, by the time she lands, she's going to find a very different story in a very different circumstance. So everyone's going to have to do a double take, right? They're constantly pivoting and readjusting. And to me, that's life. Nothing I have ever planned has ever turned out. So
I don't think it has for anybody. I think that's just the human experience.
that's it.
So along the way, so I want you to read a selection for us.
Okay.
Along the way, you mentioned her unlikely friendship. So she does get help from some very unlikely sources along the way. And I think that the reading you're going to do is one of her first interactions
Yes.
with her partner in crime, sort of.
Right. So Hung is going on a bus from Dallas to Amarillo. And on the way, she meets a red hair American cowboy wannabe. And I made him a wannabe because if she has her goals and her dreams, he has his dreams. And his is just as unrealistic as hers. I mean, they're both just on this wild chase through West Texas. And of course, he's going to speak with a Texas accent. And I gave him kind of like bionic ears. He's able to understand her when she speaks her interpretation of English. All right. So I call him the cowboy. Okay. The cowboy returns carrying a pan and a paper carton with a grinning cow. Ordinary milk, after all. We're in her point of view now. Yet how strange to see a grown man drink nutrients meant for babies. He starts to eat a brown square and must have remembered his manners. Want some? Pinch of a gooey cake, so sweet it rakes her throat. She curbs the impulse to make a face, even as he devours what's left in the pan. The cowboy spreads out a crisp map, points here and there while releasing word after word that conjoins head to tail into a long coil of exasperation. Hung hears enough to counter with a sympathetic smile, but it probably releases as a grimace. Best to pretend she can't understand a word. A crunch, the unmistakable watery crispness of celery. He's eating it raw with nothing else, like it's a fruit or a jicama. A plastic bag full of green strips cut and washed. It doesn't seem possible for anyone to eat that much celery. Ba used to saute liver with celery sliced at an angle, but that was during the plump years before her family shredded after the war. He offers her a stick. She blinks in confusion. What kind of a cowboy is he? The ones on screen squared their jaws on dried beef and mounds of beans. Once Clint Eastwood sliced a papaya with a rusty knife, but never was there a hint of celery. He chomps on another stick. Love those things. They sure keep me regular. She knows the word regular, but its use here puzzles her. Not much about him makes sense. Before she can censor herself, she releases an English question re-engineered within a Vietnamese pronunciation key. You real cowboy. Leroy's mouth hangs open, half-chomped celery for all the world to see. Good God almighty, you can talk, he whooped. What she said came out all mangled, but one thing he's got is a good set of ears. Why are you asking if I'm a real cowboy? Course I am. Just look at me. She blinks at him. Talk slow, Belisi. Talk what? Slow? Did you say please? He whistles. A sly one, huh? Never would have taken you on if I knew you could fend for yourself. This is a blessing for sure. Soon as we get to that precious address, that will be the last you see of me. Got it? She taps his shirt pocket. Go to 405 Messy Quick. He takes out the index card, the $10 spent. It says here, go to 405 Mesquite Street. Yeah, what I thought. She points to a word. Say again. Say again? Mesquite. Not Messy Quick. How'd you get from Mesquite to that? Say again, she taps. Mesquite, Mesquite. This here is it. He points to a twisty, bone-dry tree thereunder, snaps off a branch while avoiding hellish thorns. Why some people think it's fun to gather and pound the seeds into flour, he'll never know. When the Comanches and settlers did it, they had no grocery stores. She holds the branch like it's a gift, massages the delicate tear-shaped leaflets between her fingers, shakes a seed pod. Mutsiki? Better, but easy on the S, he sighs. Don't tell me I've got to run some kind of pronunciation lesson now. Say again. Mesquite, Mesquite, Mesquite. Let's move it on out before I miss my chance of kissing up to Bruce Ford.
I love it. He's so sweet, and she's so just hungry for everything. I am hungry because you describe beautiful fruits so many times in the book. Just wanted you to know that it made me a little bit hungry as I was reading. I was like, oh, that sounds good. What is the biggest takeaway for readers on this story?
For me, it's the idea of surprises in life, right? We go through life and we imagine who we're going to meet, who we're going to marry, what our house will look like, where we're going to live. And none of that might ever come true. I'm sure while she was a little girl in Vietnam, she did not imagine that she would be on a bus meeting a cowboy wannabe, speaking this English that she definitely can read and write, but she just can't pronounce it because she has never spoken to a native speaker. And so I think, and then she kind of wanders into this landscape that she can't even imagine. It doesn't even look like the cowboy movies she's been watching with her father. And then she finds this deep connection with a boy that she could not have conjured up in her brain. Not even if someone she can't. He doesn't exist yet until he actually appears in front of her. So I love that idea. Just let life surprise you. And sometimes it turns out great, right? You don't know who you're going to be friends with. You don't know who you're going to fall in love with. You don't know where you're going to live. You don't know anything. And if you just kind of let it open, just open yourself, especially someone that you think you might not even like. How do you know that? Until you really get to know them. So all my life, everyone that I've interacted with, everyone who I'm friends with, including, the person I married, I could not have conjured up these people as a child. They just didn't exist in my imagination. So.
Well, and that's a great lesson for young adults, is just like, open your brain a little bit. You don't know everything. I know you think you do, but you don't. So a cowboy and a refugee are incredibly unlikely friends. How did you come up with this combination? Where did Leroy come from?
I came up with a refugee first because I know her, right? I didn't go through, I didn't come to the United States on a boat, but I certainly know about them. I've been reading about them all my life. So I thought, okay, so I'm going to have her going through West Texas because I needed a landscape as different from lush green Vietnam as possible. So where is it not tropical? Well, West Texas is not tropical. So you're going to have flat brown land and you're going to have these mesquite trees. So I thought, so I got the landscape, I got the girl. And I said, well, she can't be wandering around there by herself. She's got to meet somebody. So who is most likely going to be there? Who's funny? I needed some kind of a humorous balance to her very intense background. And she is funny, if she, once she just relaxes, she becomes very funny. And so I thought, who's funny? A cowboy wannabe. You're not even a cowboy. Okay. You're like an academic son, and you're just wandering around trying to get into this rodeo circuit, which is serious business, and you can get really hurt. So, I just based him on all the boys I probably sat right next to in homeroom or math or something in high school when I was in Crowley High School, right outside of Fort Worth. So I feel like I know Texas pretty well.
Do any of the boys that you partially based him on know about that
I
they
am
were inspiration for a wannabe cowboy?
I'm not actually in touch with anyone from Crowley High School because my life has just changed so much. Like, I just keep zigzagging across the country, and I have not landed in Texas again. But I don't think they know. But I think if you went to high school in West Texas in the mid 80s, you'll just recognize yourself. There it is.
Yeah.
Bruce Ford is a real person in rodeo. All all the little tidbits I put in there, it's historical, it's real. Everyone was watching Raiders of the Lost Ark. That's when it came out. This is 86. So yeah, it was there. The parachute pants days, that's what it was.
So did you ever live in Amarillo where this story is set, or did you just visit and thought
No,
that's really
I drove through Amarillo many times. I spent my adolescence in Fort Worth. So that's more central.
Cowboys? Yeah,
Yeah, Cowboy
stockyard.
City,
Yeah.
yes. And then I went to my undergrad was in Austin. So, and I know Texas is so huge that each region has its own personality. So no, not Amarillo, but I did drive through it twice. I went to the Palo Duro Canyon Park, and I did all that just to get a real sense of it. And I made sure to go there during the hottest months so I could
Oh,
really
good
feel
choice.
that heat.
Yeah, good choice. We have a private question asking why you chose Butterfly Yellow as the title, and what's the significance in the
Um,
novel,
I'm not going to ruin
without
it for you.
spoiling it. Without
If
spoiling it.
you read the novel, it will be so obvious why it cannot be yellow butterfly. It must be butterfly yellow. And when I came up with that, I was just bouncing around. I was quite happy because titles either come to me or they don't. I'm writing a novel now, and I have no idea what the title will be because it's just not coming. But that one popped even before I started writing. So it was just a lovely way to cement everything so that I could write toward the title. And butterfly yellow, just once you read the novel, it will make perfect sense.
So I have to tell you, Mr. Morgan was my favorite character just because he is kind without any reason to be kind. He is just
Just,
a
yeah.
beautiful example of
Mhm.
human. So I just wanted you to know, and that I just he's the grandpa or like the dad or the stepdad that we all wish we had. We're like, oh, you're so kind and understanding. I want to brag on you a little bit and mention a New York Times review from Jennifer Donnelly, and she calls your book a radiant pearl, which I think is very appropriate. Um, she said that you show that we as human beings, fragile, strong, saved or doomed, frightened or brave, and sometimes all of those things at one time, are singing the same song, a song of grace and redemption, a song of courage, and a song of hope. I thought that that was beautiful and it encompassed it. It was such a lovely story, and it makes sense why you won the Scott Odell Award for Historical Fiction and the Rip Van Winkle Award and many other awards in 2019. What is something that you want to what's a common misconception about refugees? You mentioned that you're one. This story is just the most beautiful refugee story.
Well,
What's a common misconception about refugees?
that it will be sad. That it will be a sad, pathetic, sad story, and that people will be begging and crawling and crying, and you really can't spend 360 pages with a character who's just crying all the time and who's sad. So I wanted to show that, yeah, she has her sad moments, as we all do, but this is a spunky girl. I mean, she made it through the war. She made it across the ocean. She got past the pirates, and she's going to get to Amarillo, and she will find her brother. It's that whole idea of she's really like living beyond herself now, right? She's on a mission. But the key is once she found him, she's going to have to return to herself because it's not what she thinks. She's still going to have to work on herself. And it's the whole idea of healing. How do you heal from that kind of like devastating background? How do you get to a point where you're just not the sad case all the time? I think she shows us. You just go, you just keep going. She has new goals. She's going to take conversational English classes so she can work on her pronunciation, and she's going to take art because she likes to draw. And I'll bet you anything she will be growing those fruit trees.
Yeah. Well, and she's smart. She is
She
such
is
a
smart.
good character. I mean, all women in general, but especially young women. She
Mm-hmm.
is smart. She is hungry. She's determined. She lets
Yeah.
nothing stop her. Uh, no matter how hard it tries to stop her, she's not going to be stopped. So I love it. I don't want to move past Butterfly Yellow, but I do want to ask if you have any upcoming projects and what you're working on.
I do. Inside Out and Back Again came out about 11 years ago, and that book kind of launched me, right? I was just very lucky that it got the recognition it did. So then it gave me an opportunity to basically write more novels and stress out about more deadlines. But now I am writing a sequel to Inside Out and Back Again, and that's the one I do not have a title for because they changed the title on me. So once they changed the title, Inside Out and Back Again is not my title. Now I'm stumped. I have no idea what the next title should be, and so I'm working to write that sequel. I'm just a slow writer. You know, it took me 15 years to put Inside Out and Back together. Just kind of make it work, especially the voice. It took me 5 or 6 years to do Butterfly Yellow. I'm just a very slow, methodical writer. But my first drafts are ready to go because I've worked on it so much.
Awesome.
Yeah. So that's what I'm working on. Oh, but I have a picture book coming out in
Okay.
April. Yeah, and I'm it's based on my daughter and my mom. And it's that kind of tri-generational relationship. They're all living in the same house, and the grandmother is starting to lose her memory a little. And then the daughter and the grandfather, play her songs and sing to her and do all these things to bring her memory back. And it's a sweet story. Now that was fun to write.
Oh, that is lovely. What was your original? I'm curious now. You piqued my interest. What was your original title for
My
Inside Out and Back
original
Again?
title that they rejected at HarperCollins was Buddhist in Alabama.
That sounds amazing.
So they said, no, the kids are going to think it's a book about Buddhist religion and they won't read it. But if they had let me keep that title, then the sequel would easily be Buddhist in Texas, because High is going to have to move again to Texas. The next novel the sequel is all about, Texas and all that. So, but I didn't get to have that title. So now I don't have a sequel title.
If I saw that title at a bookstore, it would pique, and I would go, okay, that sounds very interesting. So I know you said you're stressing about deadlines. Can I ask when the sequel?
I've already missed 3. I was supposed to put it in last. My brain is it's very hard. The way I write is I don't actually need to talk to anybody, but I need to leave the house. Like, for example, I need to walk for 8 hours in New York City, come back on the train and not talk to anybody. And all of a sudden I'm just so happy. And everyone was locked down during COVID and we didn't go anywhere and blah, blah, blah. And so my brain just stopped. So I'm just now starting to recabble, just crank it again. So I hope to have it by the end of this year. That's the first draft. But who knows, and then I'm also dealing with migraines, and this probably because I'm all stressed. Who knows? But
It's been a weird year. It's been a weird year and a
but
half.
some people have written 3 novels during COVID, so who knows?
It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. You're doing quality work.
There you go.
You're not a machine. You're a human being. So if people want to find out more about you, do you have a website? Do you
I
have
do.
social media? Can you plug
It's
those
very
things
easy.
there?
It's my name, thanhhalive.com. And then every interview I've ever done is in there. They, all the books are in there. And I don't run it myself because I have no idea what I'm doing. So I have a social media manager who does all that. And I think she has me on Twitter and Instagram and all those things.
I know you're on Instagram.
Am I?
Sure.
Okay. Yes. Very good.
I know you are for sure.
Okay. There's some Facebook thing. I don't know. I have no idea what she does with them. So
that's okay. That's probably less stressful to not to have the social media without having it.
Right.
I want to thank you again for coming on tonight. I really
My pleasure.
appreciate it. I loved the book. Thank you for
Thank
joining us. Thank you again to Southwest 66 Credit Union for sponsoring these streams. And this book right here,
Look,
Butterfly
we're both
Yellow,
holding it up.
you can get this at bookstores. You can get it on Amazon. If you buy the book on Amazon, make sure that you're shopping on Amazon Smile and selecting the Permian Basin Adult Literacy Center as your
Oh,
nonprofit
great
of
idea.
choice.
Hmm.
I always like to plug that because I
Yes.
love Amazon Smile. So get the book. It is lovely. It's heartwarming, especially in this year of 2020 and 21 that we've had. So this is sweet and lovely. And thank you again. And
Thank
if
you.
everybody will stay tuned, we will have a preview of our silent auction baskets that our board members made. Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Thank you for having me.